Most people don't lose their way all at once. It happens quietly. Life keeps moving, work, messages, deadlines, weekends that blur together, and on the surface, everything looks fine. You're doing what you're supposed to do. But every now and then, usually in the early morning or late at night, there's a strange pause. A moment where the noise fades and something unspoken rises to the surface. Not a crisis, not a breakdown. Just the faint sense that time is passing faster than it should, and you're moving with it without quite knowing why. That feeling doesn't demand attention. It waits. In a world that celebrates constant motion, more goals, more output, more proof that you're moving forward, very few people stop to ask what all that movement is actually leading to. The pressure to stay busy leaves little room for stillness and even less room for reflection. So most people keep going, assuming clarity will arrive someday, that meaning will reveal itself once the next milestone is reached. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if the reason so many people feel quietly disconnected isn't because they haven't found the right answer yet, but because they've been looking in the wrong direction all along? Far from the noise, in a place where life moves slower and days are shaped by small rituals rather than constant urgency, a different way of living has quietly endured. The people there don't talk much about happiness or success. They don't chase big breakthroughs or dramatic change. Yet somehow, their days feel full. Their mornings have weight. Their time has texture. And hidden inside their ordinary routines is a simple idea. One that doesn't promise to fix everything, but might explain why that quiet question keeps returning and what it's been asking for all along. Chapter 1. The word that does translate. There is a word in Japanese that resists being neatly defined, the kind of word that loses its meaning the moment it's rushed. It's called Ikigai, and while it's often translated as a reason to live or a reason to wake up in the morning, those phrases miss something important. Ikigai isn't an answer you arrive at. It isn't a destination. It's more like a quiet thread running through daily life, often unnoticed until it's gone. The book doesn't introduce Ikigai as a philosophy to master, but as something already present, subtle, personal, and deeply ordinary. In many modern lives, especially ones shaped by schedules, expectations, and constant comparison, meaning is treated like a finish line. Something to be figured out later, once everything else is in place. But Ikigai doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It doesn't require clarity or certainty. The people described in this book don't sit down to define their lives in grand terms. They move through their days paying attention to what holds them, what steadies them, what makes the hours feel grounded instead of empty. Their sense of direction comes not from planning, but from presence. One of the most striking ideas in Ikigai is how small the source of fulfillment can be. It isn't always tied to a title, a passion project, or a lifelong ambition. Sometimes it's the repetition of a familiar task, done with care. A shop opened at the same time every morning. A craft practiced slowly over decades. A responsibility that gives structure to the day. These aren't dramatic pursuits, but they anchor life in a way that constant chasing never quite does. What makes this idea uncomfortable, especially in cultures built around achievement, is how little recognition it demands. Ikigai doesn't need to impress anyone. It doesn't require external validation or visible success. In fact, it often exists completely outside of applause. The book shows that when life is measured only by progress and outcomes, something essential is lost. The quiet satisfaction of being absorbed in what you're doing without wondering how it will be judged. At its core, Ikigai asks a gentler question than most people are used to. Not what should I become, or what should I accomplish, but what keeps me engaged with life, even on ordinary days. It's a question that doesn't rush you toward a conclusion. It simply invites you to notice. And once that noticing begins, the days start to feel different, not louder or easier, but more connected, as if life itself is slowly coming back into focus. Chapter 2. A place where time moves differently. To understand Ikigai, the book doesn't begin with theory. It begins with a place. Okinawa is introduced not as a paradise, but as a contrast. While much of the modern world measures life in deadlines, productivity, and years worked, time in Okinawa feels less like something to manage and more like something to live inside. Days are shaped by routines rather than pressure, and life doesn't appear to be racing toward an endpoint. This difference isn't accidental. It's woven into how people relate to their time, their work, and one another. What stands out most is not how long people live, but how they move through their days. Older men and women wake early, tend gardens, sweep doorways, walk familiar paths, and meet friends they've known for decades. There is no sharp dividing line between being useful and being done. Aging doesn't signal withdrawal from life, but a shift in rhythm. In a culture where worth is often tied to speed and output, this slower pace feels almost rebellious. The book quietly exposes a tension many people feel but rarely name, the sense that life is always about what comes next. Next promotion, next goal, next phase. In Okinawa, there is less obsession with the future and more respect for the present moment. People don't hurry through the day to get to something better. The day itself is treated as complete. That shift alone changes how time is experienced, less like something slipping away and more like something being used well. Another powerful detail is how work is viewed. Tasks aren't minimized or escaped, they're integrated. Even simple responsibilities are approached with care, as if they matter because they belong to the rhythm of life. This doesn't make life easier, but it makes it steadier. When each day has a shape, there's less need to constantly ask where everything is going. The motion itself provides direction. Through Okinawa, the book suggests that meaning doesn't come from extending life by force, but from filling it with intention. Time moves differently there because it's not being chased or feared. It's being inhabited. And in that way of living, the quiet question many people carry doesn't disappear, but it softens, answered not by words, but by the way each day unfolds. Chapter 3: The Myth of the Big Break. There is a story many people grow up believing, even if no one ever says it out loud. That one defining moment will eventually arrive. The job, the achievement, the breakthrough that finally makes everything click. Until then, life feels like preparation. According to Ikigai, this belief quietly shapes how people endure their days, convincing them that the present is something to get through rather than something to live. The book doesn't confront this myth aggressively. It simply places it next to real lives that never waited for a turning point. In Okinawa, fulfillment isn't postponed. The people featured don't organize their lives around a future version of themselves. They commit to what's directly in front of them, often for decades, without expecting it to transform into something else. A craft is practiced not to reach mastery and move on, but because the act itself has weight. There's no countdown to completion, no sense that meaning begins later. The work is the point. This idea challenges a deeply ingrained mindset, especially in cultures that glorify upward momentum. When success is defined by constant escalation, staying in one place can feel like failure. The book gently reveals how exhausting that logic becomes. Always waiting for the next level creates a permanent sense of incompleteness. Ikigai, by contrast, grows when a person settles into their role instead of constantly scanning the horizon for something better. One of the most striking realizations in this chapter is how repetition becomes a source of strength rather than boredom. Doing the same thing each day isn't seen as stagnation but as refinement. Through repetition, attention deepens, skills sharpen, time gains texture. The book suggests that meaning isn't lost in routine. It's often hidden inside it, waiting for someone patient enough to notice. By dismantling the myth of the big break, Ikigai reframes progress itself. Instead of asking what dramatic change will finally make life feel real, it invites a quieter shift, showing up fully to what already exists. In that steady commitment, the restless urge for something more begins to loosen, not because everything is perfect, but because life no longer feels like it's on hold. Chapter 4: Staying in Motion. One of the simplest ideas in Ikigai is also one of the most easily overlooked. Keep moving, not in the sense of rushing, grinding, or constantly proving your worth, but in remaining actively engaged with life. The book draws a clear distinction between exhaustion and stagnation. Pushing too hard wears people down, but stopping entirely carries its own quiet cost. When movement disappears, days begin to blur, and the sense of being connected to life slowly thins. In Okinawa, motion is gentle and continuous. People walk instead of rushing. They stretch, garden, clean, build, and repair. These actions aren't treated as chores to get through, but as part of staying alive in a deeper sense. The body remains involved, and through it, the mind stays alert. This kind of movement doesn't demand motivation or discipline. It's simply built into the rhythm of the day. The book subtly contrasts this with a world where many people sit still for long stretches, mentally overstimulated but physically disengaged. Screens replace motion, and efficiency replaces presence. Over time, this separation takes its toll. Not all at once, but gradually. The body slows down, and with it, the sense of momentum that once made life feel forward-moving, even without clear direction. What makes this chapter powerful is how it reframes activity as a form of attention. Movement becomes a way of staying in conversation with the day. When the hands are busy, the mind often settles. When the body participates, life feels less abstract. The book suggests that engagement, not intensity, is what sustains people over time. Staying in motion, then, isn't about chasing progress. It's about resisting drift. It's about choosing participation over withdrawal, even when life feels ordinary. In that steady involvement, something important is preserved, the feeling of being part of the day rather than watching it pass by. Chapter 5: The Power of Belonging. One of the quiet truths woven through Ikigai is that a life rarely holds together on its own. Meaning doesn't exist in isolation, it's reinforced through connection. In Okinawa, this understanding takes shape through lifelong social circles known as moe. These aren't casual friendships or networking groups formed out of convenience. They are commitments, relationships built slowly, maintained intentionally, and carried through every stage of life. What makes these bonds remarkable isn't constant closeness, but reliability. People know who will be there, who will notice, who will step in without being asked. In a culture where independence is often celebrated as the highest virtue, the book offers a different perspective. Belonging isn't a weakness or a fallback, it's a stabilizing force. When someone is anchored to others, their days feel less fragile, less easily shaken by change. The book also hints at something many people experience but rarely articulate: how isolation can quietly erode a sense of direction. Without shared routines or familiar faces, life can begin to feel abstract, as if it's happening at a distance. In Okinawa, regular gatherings, shared meals, and simple conversations act as checkpoints, moments that remind people they are seen and remembered. These connections don't revolve around ambition or status. There's no need to impress, perform, or explain one's worth. The value lies in presence itself. Showing up is enough. Over time, this creates a sense of continuity, a feeling that life is not just a series of tasks, but a shared experience unfolding together. Through the lens of belonging, Ikigai suggests that direction often comes from outside the self. When people know they matter to others, even in small, everyday ways, their lives gain shape. The quiet question doesn't vanish, but it becomes easier to carry, supported by the simple fact that no one is walking alone. Chapter 6: Enough is Enough. In Okinawa, one of the most well-known ideas is also one of the most understated. Hara-hache-bu, the practice of stopping before excess, appears on the surface to be about eating. But in Ikigai, it unfolds as something much broader, a philosophy of restraint in a world that constantly encourages more achievement, more consumption, more proof that life is being lived to its fullest. The book quietly asks what happens when that appetite is never satisfied. Many lives are structured around accumulation, not just of things, but of experiences, titles, and milestones. There's an unspoken belief that fulfillment sits just beyond the next acquisition. Yet the book shows how this mindset can leave people perpetually reaching, rarely arriving. When there is no natural stopping point, satisfaction becomes temporary, and contentment feels almost irresponsible. Ikigai offers a gentler alternative. By stopping short, by leaving space, people remain attuned to their needs rather than overwhelmed by their desires. This isn't about self-denial or simplicity for its own sake. It's about maintaining clarity. When life isn't overloaded, attention sharpens. Moments are noticed instead of rushed through. The days feel lighter, not because they hold less, but because they hold only what matters. This idea extends beyond material life into time and energy. Saying yes to everything drains meaning from anything. The people in the book protect their rhythms, their routines, and their relationships by not stretching themselves thin. Balance isn't treated as an ideal, it's treated as maintenance, something that must be practiced to keep life functional and steady. In learning when enough is enough, the book suggests that fulfillment doesn't come from constant expansion, but from discernment. Knowing when to stop allows life to settle into itself. And in that settling, the quiet restlessness that drives endless pursuit begins to loosen, replaced by a sense of being right where one needs to be. Chapter 7. Finding Without Searching. By the time Ikigai reaches its final ideas, it makes a quiet but unsettling suggestion. The thing so many people feel they're missing may not be hidden at all. It may simply be drowned out. The book observes that those who seem most grounded rarely describe themselves as having figured life out. They aren't chasing clarity or waiting for a defining realization. Instead, they stay close to what already holds their attention, allowing meaning to emerge rather than demanding it appear. One of the recurring patterns in the lives described is absorption. Time passes differently when someone is fully engaged, whether they're repairing a tool, preparing a meal, or practicing a skill refined over decades. In these moments, self-consciousness fades. There's no measuring, no comparison, no urgency to turn the experience into something else. The book suggests that this state isn't accidental, it's cultivated through consistency and care. This challenges the idea that answers come from stepping away from life to analyze it. Retreats, reinventions, and dramatic changes are often treated as the solution to restlessness. Ikigai offers a quieter path. Instead of asking big questions from a distance, it invites deeper participation. Meaning, it argues, is revealed through involvement, by staying with something long enough for it to reveal its depth. There's also an important humility in this approach. Finding without searching requires patience. It means accepting that clarity unfolds slowly and unevenly. Some days feel connected, others don't. The people in the book don't interpret this fluctuation as failure. They continue showing up, trusting that engagement itself is enough to keep them oriented. In the end, Ikigai doesn't promise resolution or certainty. It offers something more durable, a way of living that doesn't depend on constant answers. When attention is placed on what feels honest and sustaining, the quiet question that once lingered in the background begins to change. It no longer asks for explanation. It asks only for presence, and in that presence, life gradually starts to make sense. Conclusion. The idea at the heart of Ikigai is simple but not easy. Life doesn't suddenly become meaningful through a single discovery. It becomes meaningful through attention, through what you return to, what you care for, and what keeps you quietly engaged with the day. When life is lived this way, it stops feeling like something to solve and starts feeling like something to inhabit. Not every question needs an answer. Some only need to be lived into. If this story resonates with you, take a moment to sit with it. Let it linger. And if you want more stories like this, stories that slow things down and help you see life a little more clearly, subscribe, share this with someone who might need it, and stay with us. The next one might arrive right when you need it.